Hi, I'm David Chapman, Chief Strategist and Managing Director of Proficient's Organizational Change Management Practice, coming to you from my home office amidst the outbreak of COVID-19. I want to spend a few minutes today talking with you about how do we enable employee collaboration amid the COVID-19 virus. As a consulting firm with consultants around the United States, working with a lot of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 clients, we are seeing significant impact to the ways people work due to the virus. And it's worth spending a few minutes today talking about how do we take advantage of the situation we find ourselves in to ensure that we're working in the most effective and collaborative ways possible. We are really in an unprecedented time. None of us have lived through a pandemic like this that's gripped not only the United States, but the world at large. And it's changing the way we work. It's changing the way we have to work. We regularly talk, and the news talks about it, we talk about with our friends how ready and prepared we were on the medical and social fronts. Do we have enough masks, and are they in the right places? And if they're not, how do we get them from the warehouses to the front lines of hospitals and pop-up tents and wherever it needs to be, so that we protect our first responders and our doctors and nurses who are treating this in the line of in the battle. Secondly, where are our ventilators? Do we have enough ventilators? And the current thinking is we don't. And how do we choose who gets one? And those are hard life and death decisions we have to make that are tough, right? Because of the situation. We haven't found ourselves, except in maybe a wartime, where we're dealing with these kind of questions. And then on the lighter note, do we have enough toilet paper? There was a run on toilet paper. There has been. People are hoarding it. Other people don't have it. There's posts on Facebook which Walmart has toilet paper today. So we're finding that in some ways we were ready, in some ways, in many ways we weren't ready. And that's on the medical and social fronts. When we think about the business front, were we ready on that front? And in most cases, many of us aren't. And that's where I want to spend the time today. If we think about business today, we really find ourselves in one of three situations. Keeping in mind, there was no real ramp up period to get to where we are today. If we do a normal project, right, when we know where we want to go, we know what the end game is, we go through the normal course of action. We establish a business case, we put a project charter together, we get the team together, we do the requirements, we do the build, we do the testing, and we do the deployment over a period of some time. Usually 3, 6, maybe 9 months, could be longer, in some cases shorter, but at the end of the day, we have a plan. With where we are today, we didn't have that luxury. It's only been 3 or 4 months since this whole pandemic even started. And moreover, we went from all working in our offices to 100% remote in a matter of a week, if not less. I mean, there were times where, if you remember, it was take your laptop home today because we're not sure if we're going to the office tomorrow. No one knew what go live was for this situation. And we're all forced to react in a way that that's uncomfortable, unusual, and certainly not the norm, right? So we're finding ourselves in one of three situations. The first situation that we see our companies in today, or some of our companies are in today, maybe a better way to say it, is the tools were in place. The technology was in place. People were already enabled, already using it, and working collaboratively in the ways we want them to. Those companies are lucky. This is business as usual, and if you find yourself working in that situation, count your blessings. You're in a fantastic place. Go forth and conquer. The second group that we see is companies that have the technology. They've purchased it, they've implemented it, at least to some extent, and it's there. The problem is the people either haven't fully adopted it or aren't used to working in the ways we're asking them to work today, which is 100% remotely with all kinds of distractions, and we'll get to that in a minute. The third group is a group of people who are a group of companies that not only don't have adoption, but really don't have the technology in place either. And that's a problem, right? Because you've got a longer road to go to figure out what the right technology is and get that in place. However, there's hope for you. If you find yourself in scenarios 2 or 3, this webinar is for you. This next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about some of the key actions that need to take place to get to a point where you are able to be productive, you are able to be operationally efficient. This webinar won't solve all those problems, but it will give you the path to get there. So let's start with that second group. You have the tools. You've implemented something, and you are partly down the path. That's the good news, because you are on the fastest path to adoption, the fastest path to collaborating and working in ways you want. However, on the other side of that coin, the genie's out of the bottle. There is some reason why you don't have the adoption you want. Now, it may be because you never really put a change management plan in place as you rolled it out to enable the people to be successful. Maybe you didn't sell them on the buy-in or the why. Maybe you didn't roll it out completely. It's okay. We're going to address that very pragmatically through this initiative. The first thing you're going to want to do is understand the why, right? Why didn't you get that adoption? And as I said before, maybe you didn't put the case for change out there. The why people should use the technology. What's in it for me to get them out there? Maybe you didn't tell them it was out there to start with. Maybe you only rolled it out partially to certain groups and other groups never got it. Or maybe you rolled it out to everybody, but you didn't prepare them, you didn't train them appropriately. If you understand why, then you can pinpoint the adoption challenges much quicker, much more cost effectively than shooting in the dark, which leads us to our second point. Once you understand what the problems are, you can come up with a plan of attack. How many of you have been in a bar and you've seen the proverbial guy trying to impress his date, and he's over on the dartboard and he closes his eyes or turns his back to the dartboard to impress her? He throws the dart and tries to hit the board, right? And how did that work out? I'll take it half a step further. About 6 weeks ago, I was at one of the new axe throwing bars, and people were closing their eyes and throwing axes. Now, you better believe it, I stayed well away from them when they did that, because on the one time I'd attended, they actually hit the big old board that was down there with their eyes closed. We approach projects, we approach fixing projects a lot of times the same way. Let's just throw training at it. Let's just send out an email and tell people they have to use it, and we expect that to solve our problem. That's not going to work, and it's certainly not going to be efficient, and most importantly, it's not going to be cost effective. And right now, we all need to be cost conscious, right? So let's figure out the right approach to solve the problem. So if it's an understanding of lack of buy-in, let's establish a case for change. If it's a communication problem, let's build a communication strategy that leverages that case for change to get people up to speed on what's out there and how they can use it. Or maybe it is a training issue. People know it's there, but they don't know how. And maybe that is where an e-learning video comes in place, or maybe it's instructor-led training to get people bought in. At the end of the day, there is an approach, and we're going to use proven change management methods and techniques to fix the problem, but we're going to tailor the solution to that. On top of that, I want to add to the role of senior leadership. Your senior leaders play a bigger role than they ever have before. First and foremost, in a situation where we have people full of anxiety, not knowing where this virus is going to take us, is this pandemic going to continue to increase, or have we flattened the curve? What's the problem? I don't know, but I'm scared, right? Or I've got all kinds of distractions at home. I've got 3 children at home that are doing e-learning, distance learning for their schools at the same time. I'm trying to work. Leadership plays a huge role in calming those nerves and making people feel like, A, we're all in this together, and B, it's okay. We're all going to work together. We're going to meet you where you are. That role that senior leadership plays is a calming effect. Secondly, leadership's going to model the behavior. If we're going to be using Microsoft Teams or Slack or Zoom or whatever the tool is, leadership has to use it. People will follow a leader who's using it, but the leader who doesn't use it is going to have a hard time getting their team to follow. And oh, by the way, leaders, as you interact with your teams, use the tool. So if I'm going to be working in Microsoft Teams, and that's going to be our instant messaging solution going forward, I need to be messaging my team using Teams and not Slack or Same Time or whatever else the legacy tool might be in place. Thirdly, check in with your teams. How are they doing? How are they doing personally? They know that you care about them. And then how are they doing with the new tools or the new behaviors you're asking them to exhibit? Fourthly, how do you know when you get there? Having some measurements in place is key. So if you've already rolled this out, at least partially, you should have access to some metrics. Most tools come with some basic metrics built in. Sometimes they're easy to get to, sometimes they're not. You can work with your IT group if you don't know how to get to them to figure out how to get to those metrics. But baseline, understand where you are today. You can, if you have that, you'll be able to then, once you have rolled out further, more completely, using the tools I'm talking about from a change management perspective, you'll be much more easy to understand the progress you're making. You'll know when you've succeeded. You'll understand where your gaps are. By the way, a lot of these tools have add-on applications that some are for purchase, some are even free, that provide you much more robust analytics as well, which really helps you understand where adoption has taken place and how much by group, by individual, by application, whatever it may be. And that can be extremely valuable as you continue to hone in and refine your change plan to get to where you want to go. You know, I was talking to someone earlier today, and they made a really good point, right? We're all figuring out, we're all experimenting with new things together at paces we've never done before. And we're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay. But when we do fail, if we learn from it, and analytics help us with this, we can then understand how to tweak the knobs, turn the dials a little bit. So when we go at it again, or in different groups, we're able to be much more successful, much more quickly. And then finally, we need to celebrate. Right now, there is a lot of negativity out there. There's a lot of people who are down and depressed. We always talk in change management about celebrating successes because it's a really important key, really important tool to sustaining behavior. Putting up on pedestals, if you will, people or groups that are doing things the right way, the way we want them to. We call that reinforcing behavior, reinforcing changed behavior. We really, really want to do that right now, especially in these really compressed timelines. How do we highlight where things are working well and showing why they're working, what the benefits are? And you can gamify it. You can provide rewards. You can throw out gift cards for teams that are doing their meetings online using the new tool or interacting on a business social media platform like Yammer or within Teams or within Slack or whatever it may be, collaborating in ways that they never did before. But celebrate that when the team's out there doing it. Provide those incentives, provide those rewards. There's a lot of things we can do, but celebrating successes right now is something that's absolutely critical. So in summary, if you've got the tool out there already, or you got the tool on your property, if you will, on your premise, getting people to use it is a challenge, but you're well on the curve, and there's a ton of hope in that. However, what if you're saying, oh my gosh, we weren't ready for this. The tool we have is outdated. It's not even supported anymore by the maker. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna survive? How are our employees gonna manage through this? Well, true, this route may be a little bit longer than the other situation, but be encouraged that this route provides you maybe the higher, quicker overall adoption than that other group, because you're not trying to change behaviors or negative perceptions for something that may have been rolled out and not adopted to start with. So there's good news there. So how do you make this happen? Well, first and foremost, you've got to figure out the tool that you want to use. And again, this is a tool agnostic conversation, so I'm not going to pinpoint one tool versus another, but there are pros and cons to each of the ones that I have listed up there: Teams, Slack, Zoom, WebEx, and there are other tools. There are pros and cons to each of those, and you need to figure out which one works best with your organization, what your goals are, what other applications you have in place that may need to integrate with these tools, and how you're going to roll it out, cost factors, whatever it may be. There's a lot of things to consider. The second thing that you must consider beyond simply the technology is other things like governance or security or other factors that have to be put in place, to put the walls up with around how you're going to use this tool. You don't want the wild, wild west, because implementing governance, implementing security later can oftentimes be seen as a detriment to users. You're actually pulling things away from them that have gotten used to And that's not an overall good user experience. So the more you can put that in place now, the better. Then, once you have the tool, once you've got it implemented, and by the way, that can happen pretty fast. These tools, all the ones on the screen, are relatively easy to implement technologically speaking. They're harder on the adoption piece. So that piece can be pretty fast if you swarm it, if you put a task force in it to make it happen. Then you've got to go back to what that group 2 group was dealing with, right? And that is, how do you get the adoption? And we would really encourage you to follow a change management methodology to drive buy-in, user engagement, and ultimately adoption. Now you might be saying, "Oh, David, we don't have time for that. We've got to get this on. We got to get this in yesterday, and we're already behind the 8 ball because we're choosing a tool." I would tell you, you can accelerate a lot of the steps in the change management program, but follow one. One of the things I'm seeing, I talked to a client yesterday who didn't like how they rolled out the old platform for the technology they were dealing with, because they just turned it on and sent an email out to the group that said, "Hey, you should use this." They said, "Hey, we've been talking to this company for a while and they want to do change management the right way." And then I heard them talk about, "Hey, we're going to roll this out because we have to, because of the situation we're in now with everybody working from home, and we're going to tell them it's out there." Well, they're probably going to have about the same impact and the same effect they had last time they did this by doing it that way. So we're really discouraging that. So I get it. I get the urgency, but follow a structured change approach to drive that engagement and adoption. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with change management, let me briefly introduce you to that topic, what I'm talking about here. If we want to have success with what we're talking about here, there's going to be 2 factors that have to be done right. First, we have to get the technology in and working correctly. That's the easy part for these collaboration tools I'm talking about. The second piece of that is we have to get people actively engaged, adopting a new solution. At Proficient, we like to say we want to have people ready, willing, and able to be successful. Change management then is the structured approach for making that happen. It's the structured approach for driving individual and collective adoption, thus ensuring the achievement of expected benefits and ultimately ROI. ROI is the name of the game, right? We talk about change management as being the soft stuff. Let me be clear. While some of the stuff we do may be soft, we're talking real dollars here. We're talking 75 to 80% of your ROI is driven by change management. Change management is a hard discipline. How do you do change management? And there's multiple change management methodologies that are out there, and that's great. Now, what I've got on the screen is Proficient, and this is a proprietary methodology that we use. Some of you may be familiar with ProSize ADKAR model. That's great. There are others, LaMarche, Cotter. Whatever you do, they're all fundamentally 70 to 80 to 90% the same, with the same foundational elements. I'm going to talk to you briefly about how we do it. But again, I think this would be similar if you looked at another methodology. And if these are new to you, then we're going to introduce you very quickly to what a good change management methodology looks like. First and foremost, what I would tell you is change management methodologies are pragmatic and they're iterative. They are the sandbox. It's the walls we're going to build with which we're going to play in, right? It's a structured approach. It's not fly by the seat of your pants. We know how we're going to get from point A to point Z. Secondly, it's iterative. As project conditions change, we have to be reactive. If we don't change our people approach and our people strategy and the people tactics as the solution is changing around us, the technology solution, or in this case, the world around us is changing, if we're not reactive and responsive to that, we are not going to be at the right place when we go live, or when we say we're ready to fully implement and expect behavior change. It isn't going to happen. That said, and if you take nothing away from this webinar, but part of a change management methodology, let me tell you, it's this piece. You have to start somewhere. In our case, it's the define phase, or what we call it, and it starts with the question of why. Always start with why. Simon Sinek did a great TED Talk on that a few years ago. If you haven't seen that, I'll plug that here real quick. But it's really important people understand why we're doing this, why we switched this new solution, why we're implementing it, why it's going to be effective for how we work in a 100% remote environment that we're working today. Most importantly, what's in it for me? Why should I care? If I get people to understand that, what's in it for me in the case for change, then they'll pay attention to communications and training. I'm well down the path to adoption and enablement of my user base. If I miss that, I'm going to have a hard time. I don't care how many messages I send out. I don't care how much training I do. People are not going to adopt it. I'll put it back to the group, the people that are following that group too. I'd be willing to hazard a guess that if you're challenged by adoption of existing technology, it's because you didn't set the case for change right. Go after it, get it right. It's critically important. So now what? And I'll end here. Again, I can't fix all of the problems in a 20-minute webinar here, but because your situation is different than everyone else. However, hopefully you understand now the tactics of the things you need to consider to get your users across your board, across your organization, working more effectively in a collaborative way to be able to do your business the way you want to do it. So if you find yourself having benefited from some of the information that you've heard today and some of those key tactics, key things you want to do, you're saying, okay, what do I do? How do I make it happen? Well, point A here, if you have resources in-house, if you have a change management team or people with the right skill sets and the capacity amidst everything else going on to get this stuff done, enlist them now. Get them on board and start taking action today. You don't have time to lose. A lot of our clients right now are putting all their projects on hold, reconsidering what do we need to do, what are the priority one items that we're going to go after, we're going to stop everything else right now, and that's all great. This is a project that has to happen today because it impacts the foundational underpinnings to everything else you do. So if you've got those people in-house, put them on this, get it going. If you don't have the people in-house, if you don't, or they don't have the capacity, maybe you do have a great group of people, but they don't have capacity with everything else going on, then there are people, and speaking personally, like Proficient, we would love to help you. We have a change management team that loves what we do, and we would love to dive into this with you. So on that note, we are offering a free virtual assessment, has to be virtual now, right? But an offering a free assessment with you to talk about your situation, where you are, and what your next steps might look like. Whether you fall into scenario 2 or scenario 3, whether you have people in house or want to engage a third party. Regardless, we would love to do that. My contact information is below. Feel free to email me. I'll be as absolutely responsive as I can because I recognize time is of the essence. There is an urgency here to make this happen. With that, I'll close. We are in an unprecedented time, as we have discussed. This is a time where we're charting our paths. We're trying stuff that's new. We're trying stuff that's different. Some things are going to work. Some things are going to fail, and that's okay. We're going to react quickly to those things that don't work, tweak them, spin the dial a little bit, and get to where they need to be. I bid you farewell. I wish you the best in your journey along in these unprecedented times, uncharted waters for many of us. I wish you health and safety as you go forward for you and your teams. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today, and look forward to talking with those of you who we potentially can help in the near future. Thanks again.